Welcome to part two of Citizens Forum, April the 24th. The guest in this segment is John Farquharson. Before we start, I just want to say thank you to our great volunteer crew who does the filming and working the board, and to the Shaw staff that makes it possible. John Farquharson, we're going to be talking about local issues. Start wherever you want.
Okay, thanks, Jack. I mentioned to you the three topics of amalgamation, follow-up on the bridge, and sewage. And I made my rounds over the last month or so in terms of going to various events, and one was an event held by Amalgamation Yes, which is a new group that's come together to have a look at amalgamation. And when I went in there, I was tending towards being in favor of it in terms for the reasons of I'm thinking, well, we got 13 municipalities. This can't possibly be the best way to arrange, a third of a million people. Certainly, there's another arrangement which would allow us, as a potential city of a third of a million, to realize, our full potential as such. And I also became aware of the availability of some funding for cities that are over 100,000 as opposed to those that are under. So Saanich is able to go, I think, to the federal funding sources that nobody else is able to, because we're all under 100,000. So that's when I went in, and I listened to the various speakers and whatnot. And one of the big points they stressed was the objective being, the efficiency of services. Which certainly makes sense. There's some people saying that there is no appreciable increase in efficiency and so on. But the person that really caught my ear was this gentleman who talked about enhanced accountability through amalgamation. And his point was that when the CRD directors come to the table to make decisions about the region, they're not there to further the best interest of the region as a whole. They're there to defend and further the interests of their municipality within the regional context.
Which may not be a bad thing. I'm opposed to amalgamation, so the reason I'm opposed is that, it's kind of a crazy reason maybe. The big media in town have been supporting amalgamation for years now. CFAX, who I listened to a lot, frequently went on and on about how good and great amalgamation was going to be. And when I see the town's corporate-owned media pushing something, my antenna go up right away. If amalgamation is good, I'm all for it. Personally, I like having small governments like we do. You can know your city councilors. You can be involved if you want to be. Even with small governments, small cities, 13 small cities here, I still feel that the public is completely outside the decision-making loop. But at least, because we have 13 different governments, it's harder for a centralized body like big business to control them all. Whereas if we have one city government, and in fact, interesting, Global News just did someone secretly filmed a group of developers. Did you see that?
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, someone secretly filmed a group of developers in Calgary, basically talking about how they were going to give money in BC, here in the Greater Victoria area, to candidates in one of our municipalities in order to get elected the people who would support the developments that these guys wanted to build. They're in Calgary talking about funding candidates here in Victoria as well as in Calgary itself. And I mean, this is allowed, which is interesting. So that's my first take on amalgamation.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, the first step that Amalgamation Yes is going to take is to get some funding from the provincial government to fund a good hard bit of research into the pluses and minuses of amalgamation.
You think they'll get that funding?
Don't know, but that's the first step, which is great, because then if this research shows conclusively that it's just not a good move for a variety of reasons, then it's dead for 5 years. So it can't come up again for another 5 years.
My problem is twofold. I would say, why should they get funding? There's lots of groups that want funding that don't get it for whatever. And secondly, who's going to, I mean, when these things happen, can you ever trust the information you get out of them? It depends on who's hired and what they're told to do.
Always an issue.
Yeah.
But it takes me to my second point here, my second issue, which was sewage. So I went to a sewage education forum put on by Vic West, and it was around the biosolids, or the sludge plant that's been proposed over in Esquimalt. Now it's very close to Vic West. Vic West picked up and hosted an information session. And what it got me to thinking, okay, so Esquimalt has one table at the CRD. Victoria and Saanich combined have 9, which I think is the majority. And lo and behold, the majority of CRD directors voted to put this particular facility into the city that only had, 1 vote. So, it goes back to my earlier point in terms of these representatives are at the table to defend their own interests. So what do you do when it comes to the increasing number of regional issues that we're having to deal with? Do you deal with it through the CRD, or do you look at some form of amalgamation?
Well, on amalgamation, this is my bottom line, and I think it's the same as yours. I'd like to see honest research.
Sure. That's where you start.
And then
go from there.
And then go from there and see what makes sense.
Yeah.
We can even try it, and if it doesn't work, try something small, see what happens, and then come back. Yeah, I think that's what most people would want, and I think that's what both of us want. But regarding the sewage thing, the science seems to suggest we don't even need to do it.
Yeah, I was here a few weeks ago, or I guess a couple of months ago, and there's that issue. Okay, that's still out there. The science, again, talking to the CRD director or chairperson of the wastewater committee, was asked directly, can you produce a credible, authoritative, independent scientific source, authority, who will back the science on this particular project, and was told no, they couldn't. Not that they wouldn't, but they couldn't. But this issue is a bit different. I mean, obviously they're all connected, but this one has to do with going forward with this project, as you point out, totally unfounded by the science, to build this biosolids plant in Esquimalt. So Vic West, which is also going to be impacted because of their geographic location, put together this forum, invited the CRD to send a technical expert to, provide some input on as to why this about this biosolids plant, and was told that they didn't want to engage. They didn't want to engage on this issue during a political campaign, during a provincial election, right? So I'm thinking to myself, well, what better time is there to engage with the public on an issue such as this than during an election campaign?
They just make up the excuses as they go along. I mean,
well, think of the logic, though. I mean, the logic is, as well as I, let's say in Victoria, 26% of the people vote, or in and around that neighborhood, and the number of people who closely follow issues during elections are, in the low single digits. So when you look at the number of people who think about or engage around these issues, the best time to get them is when there's an election campaign, because that's when you have the highest number of people who are going to come out, listen, engage, have dialogue, do what politics is all about.
So the CRD is saying we won't talk about it at this point.
They declined to come last week.
The actions of the CRD from beginning to end on this have been kind of, I'd say, just undemocratic. I think the staff has way too much power, and they always seem to have an agenda. Senior staff, I've noticed, in bodies like the CRD, and you can go right up to the federal government. They've shown the numbers even. They have different agendas than the agenda of necessarily what's best for the people they're supposed to be serving.
Yeah, an excellent example of that is the bridge, so which takes me to my third issue.
The Blue Bridge. The
Blue Bridge, as I segue over. So I co-signed, along with 12 other individuals, a letter to both mayor and council and to the city manager, Gail Stevens, and asking for an explanation of why, when she was advised by the Assistant Director of Finance that the bridge was not actually on budget at $77 million. It was actually around 5 or 6 over. So this person also advised Gail Stevens, City Manager, to inform Council of such. Nothing happened, and in October, the City Manager was at a public forum speaking to the public, and the public was advised by her that the bridge project was on time and on budget, when she had been advised 3 months earlier that we might have a problem here. There's $5 or $6 million.
When you say October,
over.
you mean 1 month prior to the municipal election?
Yeah, 2 months prior to the 1st of October to the end of November. So yeah, 8 weeks out from an election. And so part of the letter said that the public might have been, didn't say they were, might have been misled as to the financial health, if you will, of the bridge project 8 weeks before the municipal election.
So both the public and our city council, I guess, could have been misled.
Right.
Or might have been misled.
Might have been misled.
Yes, yes.
Hey, so that I co-signed that letter a month ago. Haven't heard anything back, but the media picked it up. So the mayor was on CFAX and on CBC.
Mayor Fortin?
I'm sorry, Mayor Fortin was on CFAX, CBC, basically saying that this request for part of the letter said, here's our concern. We want a credible public explanation by the city manager as to what's going on here.
And again, we're talking about the Blue Bridge. We're talking about cost estimates that were put forward.
This was the budget.
Right, saying of about $77 million.
We were told, the public was told, that the bridge was on budget in October, 8 weeks out.
8 weeks away from the city election.
8 weeks out from the city election in 2011, when the city manager had been told and had been advised to tell council that indeed looks like they were $5 million over. So the mayor goes on CFAX, CBC, and is asked about and the other part of the letter said, if a credible public explanation is not provided, then the request was for a public inquiry.
So you want the city manager to explain why, when she knew that it looked like the bridge could be over budget by $5 million, she did not make that fact public.
Right.
Sounds like a good question.
Well, again, I mean, it was 8 weeks out before an election, and at what better time for the voting public to have full and open access to the information that they need to make an informed decision as to
and
who to
back then
vote
there was
for.
still time to change direction, I assume. Because remember, I don't know if this is still possible, but just a couple of years ago, the initial recommendation from the City of Victoria's contractors, who they hired to tell them what to do, was to repair the bridge at a cost of under $10 million. That was the original recommendation. This city council has now brought us to the point where it's up to, I think, $92 million total.
Yeah, 17 over, it's 17 million, 15. Anyways, it's 15, 16, 17 million over that 77 million.
And I think even worse, the rail link that could be bringing commuter rail from Langford right now, trains every 10 minutes, if necessary, from Langford into downtown Victoria, which would save the downtown. Yeah. It would make the downtown, again, a major shopping area. That bridge has now been cut because of this Blue Bridge project. It's gone. And nobody talks about that anymore, which means de facto that the new center of our city will be, according to the current plan, the Walmart Mall called Uptown.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Young, who was the most vocal opponent of building the new bridge, has unfortunately and very reluctantly decided to, support it now, as I understand it. And so unfortunately, it looks like that, that ship has sailed, so to say, in terms of getting a new bridge. But now the focus is on, okay, if we're going to do this, let's not absolutely break the bank on building a new bridge. But it was interesting to hear the mayor on CFAX, in the sense that he wouldn't answer the question, and the question was quite simple. Why would the city manager go into a public meeting and say that the bridge is on budget and on time and on budget, when she knew and had been advised to tell council that they were really actually $5 or $6 million over? And the mayor just stonewalled Stephen Andrews,
Why would Dean Fortin not answer that question? I mean, it seems like an important question.
Well, he reads, as the host Stephen Andrews pointed out a number of times, Mayor Fortin just kept reading from prepared notes.
Well, it's funny, because your telling me this is really the only time I've ever heard it. I'm at work, so like everybody else, you can't really follow these programs that are on during the day. It hasn't really been in the news. There's been no media criticism of Dean Fortin over the city, not much that I've really noticed. But I mean, I think this city council and city staff from the beginning on this bridge project, the process has been undemocratic, I think you would agree, and it's led us into a bit of a mess.
Well, yeah, and it's now asking questions about this mess, about this financial mess. It's gone from 77 to 92.
It really has gone from 10 to 92.
Well, depends how far back you want to go. And so it's looking at that, and the mayor was kind of interesting in the sense that he just would not answer the question that Stephen Andrews was asking. Why would your senior staff, the most senior staff, go in and tell the public something that was basically incorrect? And he got very defensive and began to attack Stephen Andrews for asking a difficult question. Program on CBC, Power and Politics, Evan Solomon, and he does a show that asks tough but fair questions. And all of the questions that Stephen Andrews asked on CFAX, they were tough, but they were fair. And I think at that point, he was acting on behalf of the public. He was inquiring and asking tough questions about this bridge, about this information that didn't come out to the public. And he was just,
couldn't get an answer.
Just stonewalled.
Well, to be continued. I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very
no.
much, John Farquharson. We'll continue in a few weeks. I think these issues are the utmost importance, and we'll talk about them, and hopefully we'll solve them. Thanks, John.
That's part two.
Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum. In this segment, we're talking with Andrew Hunter, and we're going to be talking about, well, you gave it a nice title, Gypsies, Drones, and Thieves. And take it away, Andrew.
Well, Jack, I'm here to represent the Roma traveler people. I am a DOSTA campaigner, which means that I'm a Roma traveler activist.
You should just say that Roma
is a more politically correct term for gypsies.
The people we hear.
And recently, on April the 8th, was DOSTA Day, which is an international Roma Day for both education and activism. And I can say that just yesterday, April 23rd, there was a demonstration in front of the CRTC in Ottawa, which actually hit the mainstream news, which is kind of amazing because Roma news and Roma issues never make it to the mainstream media. And yesterday, the demonstration at the CRTC was over Sun Media. Now, last year, in September of 2012, Ezra Levant of Sun Media made a lot of hate crime-like comments about gypsies, which was not received by both the Roma community and gypsies in general as being nothing less than libelous. So yesterday, there was a demonstration in front of the CRTC because of the licensing of Sun Media and whether or not it should go ahead. So that was one recent development in the whole Roma education process, which was very valuable for all of us to learn more about the Roma traveler people.
Well, I don't know anything, so you want to fill us
Well,
in?
it's a very long story, and
You'll have to make it short.
I'll make it short.
Yeah.
The Roma, or Gypsies, come from Rajasthan in northern India originally. That's what is the history that we've learned so far. And they proceeded from northern India into Eastern Europe in the 14th century. And they basically settled in most parts of Eastern Europe, such as Hungary and Romania. And since then, for the last 500 years, there has been chronic persecution and racism against the Roma and traveler people. And one film came out recently called A People Uncounted, and it was made by a producer in Toronto, and it was the history of the gypsies and Roma and travelers, which outlined what happened, for instance, in the Second World War. And Second World War history recounts many persecuted peoples, of which are the Jewish people, Catholic people, nuns, etc., etc. But one missing link in that history are the gypsies, because the gypsies were forced into camps during the Second World War, and they were led to the chambers too. And the most shocking thing about that history is that the civic officials, that means the municipal leaders and workers and bureaucrats, signed off on the deportation of gypsies from major cities across Europe. And the scary part now, today, in 2013, is that it is still happening. Right now, in various parts of Europe, including Macedonia, Hungary, France, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, the Roma are being persecuted, and nothing is happening. So that's why there is a global campaign called DOSTA, D-O-S-T-A, which means enough. And it is designed to bring awareness to the Roma traveler issues, but also educate the public on the history of the Gypsies and Roma.
Well, I'm glad you've mentioned this, because I don't know anything about it, and I guess if people Google the word DOSTA, they can find out some information. Do you want to move on to part 2 of this little threesome?
I would love to, Jack.
Okay. Thieves?
Well,
Homelessness
homelessness is a very crucial issue that we can always relate to and hopefully discuss. My homeless journey has been a very dark and disturbing one, and I think it's worthwhile telling in a very chronological and rapid way. Last year in 2012, I was asked at one of the new Work BC centers. Now, the Work BC centers are centers where people on income assistance, unemployed, street people can go and access facilities to find work or, find employment anywhere they can.
You weren't homeless at that time?
I wasn't homeless. I was on income assistance, and I did have housing, and I was asked to speak at the opening. So this is June of 2012. And so I decided, because I was asked to speak on behalf of the homelessness, on behalf of the income assistance users, and I thought, first of all, I would fly my own flag. I said, I've got to promote myself and say I'm available for an employment opportunity. But then I decided to speak for the users because it was a voice that was never heard. So I mentioned certain things to how to adjust and tweak the equipment there for private use and useful computer use and screens and everything. And then I followed that up with an email to the minister who appeared at the opening.
And this is the opening of a
Work BC job center,
okay,
which is run by in a collective agreement between the federal and provincial government, as a back to work employment infrastructure to get people on income assistance back to work. Okay. So I sent a follow-up email to the minister, Dieu, who filled in for Minister Chong, suggesting that my individual case was unfair in my view, and I would like to find out why. Now, my individual case was the fact that I was being garnished. In other words, my early CPP pension plus my income assistance was being garnished. In other words, I should have been getting $741.52, but instead I'm getting $610.
So you should have been getting 740. Instead, you're getting 610, losing $130 a month.
So for $131.52 a month, I petitioned the government to tell me why I wasn't allowed to receive that.
And this is your total income.
And this would be my total income that I thought I was eligible for. So I petitioned the minister, and then I took it to the ombudsperson but even though people were telling me, Andrew, there's a government policy here that is fixed in stone that you can't change. It's government policy. But I thought, as an individual citizen, I should have a reason why I was being denied this extra $131.52. So therefore, I went on a work to rule campaign, which is a way of saying I'm on government assistance, but I'm appealing the amount that I get. And while I'm under appeal, I'm working to rule. And of course, that was not received very well by the government. And in the end, I was deleted from income assistance and left homeless.
You mean they took away the $610?
That's correct. I was, in October of 2012, I was removed from income assistance and left homeless as a result.
So what happened then?
Well, what happened then, I had many options. Either remain homeless or appeal. And
so when you were homeless, where were you living? I mean,
what happened was I was living in an apartment of a friend's place who had no electricity. So if you can imagine living in a dark apartment all day with no food and no heating and no hydro, so I had to live like that for a month, and then I decided to appeal under the reconsideration process, which means I had to resubmit all the documents to prove that I was eligible for income assistance. And proudly speaking, I'm very well documented in my life, so when people ask me for documents about myself, beware, because I have them all. So I submitted all my documents, and then I was allowed to go back on income assistance in December of last year.
And then you became homed again.
I had housing security once again, having been rendered homeless for a month.
Okay. Let's just talk about, I mean, I've been poor in my life, but I've never been homeless. It just seems like, why would the people who run this country want people to be homeless? I mean, have created a situation where people have to be homeless in what is probably the richest nation in the world. It's crazy.
Well, as you know, on previous shows, Jack, which I've seen, there has to be a housing policy. And I think as someone who's experienced it firsthand, housing is the major, crucial issue for anyone who's on income assistance or any kind of assistance. If you don't have a housing, you don't have a chance. And so the housing is so unaffordable on $610 a month, because as you could imagine, there's nothing you can get for that amount. And I can speak currently, in my current housing situation, I am basically paying all of my income assistance check for my housing, and that leaves me $10 a month to live off, which is obviously unrealistic and unaffordable, and it's not survivable.
Well, there is a housing policy in this country. Obviously, it's to keep people homeless, because that's what we have. I always think, well, and there are thousands of people in our community, and I guess tens of thousands of people across BC and Canada who are in the same boat. It's a shame on all of us, really, that we've let the people who run this country create such a horrible situation. That's all I can say.
Well, Jack, I can say that the housing policy, the social housing policy is very crucial. As you know, the Federal Liberal Party, I think, had a red book plan for some sort of social housing policy, and hopefully the federal NDP, when they win in 2015, will bring in some sort of a social housing policy, because the housing deficit in terms of homelessness is continual and will continue to be the most important issue in terms of solving homelessness in Victoria and across Canada.
You know, a few weeks ago, we had someone on the program who said that we can build and maintain and provide support workers in 700 supportive housing units in Victoria. We could build 700 supportive housing units in Victoria, build them, maintain them, pay off the mortgage, and hire the staff to work in them for $14 million a year. And in fact, when you break down the numbers, that's $20,000 a unit, which is quite reasonable. When I heard that number and it made sense, I was absolutely shocked, because 700 units we can build and maintain for $14 million a year, and they won't do it. They spent $500 million on a roof for BC Place. $500 million on a roof for BC Place. $14 million would build 700 supportive units, $14 million a year, and they won't do it. I don't know what words to use, but there's that story. Let's move on to drones if you want to, or we can...
Yes, okay, I'm glad you brought that up, Jack. Now, the drones, for those watching, are unmanned aerial vehicles, which are incredibly technologically advanced and equipped with both weapons and surveillance possibilities. And as we've heard, President Obama has increased the use of drones, predator drones, for both surveillance activities, but also for targeted killings of innocent people in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and other parts of the world. And as I heard earlier this week, the one possible reason for the Boston blowback, which is the way I like to describe it, is they're trying to bring in the civilian application of drones. Now, what that means is that we see the militarization of drones, which means the military is using drones for activities and episodes overseas, but the civilian application by the police forces and other security forces in the United States is on the increase, and no one is watching. In other words, people won't know that little drones, which are capable of being as small as a butterfly, can be used for surveillance activities for people in any part of their lives. So that's the one thing we must be aware of, is the use of drones and the transfer from drones from the military aspect to the civilian application. And that's very, very scary and very, very alarming for any civilian, whether it be in Canada or the US.
I've heard that in parts of, I think they were talking about Afghanistan, but they may have been talking about Pakistan, entire populations entire populations are being psychologically impacted by these drones, because they just bring unseen sudden death from the sky at any time, and it happens enough that, I don't know if you've heard this, about entire populations being psychologically, they're like getting post-traumatic stress disorder. It's crazy.
Well, that's one of the theories that I would like to espouse here, is that there's a new kind of threat in this world, and perhaps across the globe, and that is the war child survivors. Now, one possible explanation for what happened in Boston is that these people who apparently come from Chechnya, which is a war-torn region, and if you could imagine, if you were a young child growing up in a war-torn region and all you see is death and destruction and bombs and other military attacks in your city, in your town, in your village, you are traumatized permanently. And this is what we're creating across the world, are these traumatized civilians who obviously...
Although we do not know that the official story that we're being told is correct, as far as I know. I mean, is there any reason to believe the official story?
Well, if we believe the story that these particular individuals are from a war-torn area and they were exposed to major trauma from both military and security forces and destruction and use of military weapons, you could imagine how post-traumatic stress disorder would apply to a young child who's in their growth stages of life and the trauma that would cause. And that's where I think is something that is not talked about.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, Andrew Hunter, thank you very much. I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very much for watching Citizens Forum this week. Goodbye. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Jack.